Mental health. The reason I started this channel over 5 years ago was to do mental health advocacy, and I started the channel through a series called Let's Talk About Mental Health. And I haven't made a video about mental health specifically for like over 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years. And it's about time that changed. I was just like questioning whether I should do my intro or not. I'll sort of change it up. Hi, I'm Lev. For those of you who are new, I use he him pronouns. Welcome to Lionheart Lev, my channel. In this video specifically, I want to talk briefly about mental health therapy and sort of some tips and advice that may be helpful. I've been to, how many sessions? Probably over 50 sessions of therapy in total, 51-hour sessions of therapy throughout my life so far. And I'm still going to therapy, so that number just keeps adding and adding and adding. And there's no shame in going to therapy. The first thing I'd say is mental health therapy or seeing a therapist, whether that be a social worker, a mental health social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, whatever it may be, whatever sort of mental professional it may be, it's not just for clinical mental health like problems. So basically, we don't have to be diagnosed with severe depression or severe anxiety or like bipolar or OCD or whatnot to go see a therapist. It's not a prerequisite to go see a therapist. Having a formally diagnosed mental health concern is not a prerequisite to go see a therapist. Therapy is also for when we're doing well and we want to grow in a certain area. Or like now for me, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing very well. But I'm still seeing a therapist to improve my self-esteem and find ways to improve different aspects of my life. Even though now I'm not clinically depressed, I'm not clinically socially anxious, yet I still go see a therapist because I want to keep growing and keep learning. So yeah, mental health therapy is not just for those who are diagnosed with a clinical mental health issue. And you can go to therapy when you're doing relatively well as well. It's just therapy, like another way to look at it is therapy is not just for us to get from rock bottom to I'm functioning somewhat okay mode. Therapy can be used to grow as well when we're doing okay and jump to the next level, not just from rock bottom and being like I'm barely surviving to I'm somewhat functional mode. It's also used to level up. I'm gonna climb this thing and then keep talking while sitting up here. You can watch me climb this thing and be a monkey. I actually really like climbing things. If there was a bunch of kids around here, I wouldn't be climbing this thing right now, but there's no one here, so I have this whole thing to myself. I think I just trapped myself here. It's not ideal. No, that was not a very strategic. Okay, all right, let's just monkey up here and sit on here and talk about therapy while I'm sort of monkeying up here. So the other thing about this is not actually a very comfortable position, but you know what? I'm gonna sit here anyway for this next scene. The next thing is it's okay not to know what to talk about in therapy. We don't have to go to therapy, whether it be our first time in therapy or our 10th time in therapy. We don't have to have all the answers. Okay, that rope is like cutting off my face. Better. We don't have to know all the answers before we go to therapy. And I think that's part of the point of therapy, is to help us figure out what may be going on, explore our psyche, things that are in our subconscious, things that we may not be aware of ourselves. So I'm breathing because I climbed this thing. We don't have to show up to therapy with a thesis prepared to show our therapist. We can just show up, actually not know anything at all, but like I feel sad or I feel awful and I don't really know what's going on in my head, or I feel awful and I have somewhat of an idea of what's going on, but I don't really know how to piece it all together. There's just all these puzzle pieces and I don't know where all this fits. I don't know what all this means. It's okay to show up not knowing all the answers or knowing any answers really. Because part of therapy, in my experience as a client who's gone a lot of times, is, I lost my train of thought, is the therapist will help you put everything together. I say you, but I mean we, like we. The therapist helps us put everything in together and helps us navigate through the waters of our mind in a safe way if you have a good therapist. So don't fret going to therapy try not to hesitate going to therapy if the reason is I don't know what to say to my therapist, because that happens to me too. Like, I mean, like, sometimes I don't know what to say, and then the therapist also prompts us. They can also prompt us by asking us questions to dig a bit deeper as well. So don't worry if you don't have all the answers or don't know what to talk about, because that's what the therapist also helps us do. Now I have to climb back down. Ow. The next thing about therapy, and it's the reality, is that the therapist doesn't do the work for us. What I mean by this is, so brief context is I used to experience clinical depression, as in major depression, and severe social anxiety, which are like clinical. So I was like diagnosed by a clinical psychologist with severe social anxiety and major depressive disorder. And at the time, I had a lot of rock bottoms as well, and thought a lot about ending my life. This was a while back. And if I just purely went to therapy sessions without doing any sort of homework, for lack of better words, I wouldn't get to where I am today, and I wouldn't make so much progress. Because the goal for me, what I've learned about going to therapy is that the therapist acts as sort of a guide. They guide me, they explain things to me, help me understand how my mind works, why I may be feeling certain ways. I give some explanations to things, hold a safe space to explore trauma and other difficult things that, say, a friend may not be qualified for or have the resource to do. Things like giving me strategies, helping me build up my abilities to not just cope, but thrive in life and overcome adversity. Basically, they also train me to use certain tools and techniques to improve my mental health. But what the therapist doesn't do is do that for me. Oftentimes when I go to therapy, I get assigned homework, which is stuff I do in between therapy sessions. For example, recent example of my current therapist is when I came to see him initially 5 months ago, I had worse self-esteem than I do now. And one of the homework tasks he gave me that was so cringe that I hated, but I did it, and it ended up over time being not so cringe, is writing down 4 things I like about myself every day. Like in a little notebook, or either say it out loud or write it down, or write it down, say it out loud, or sort of think it in my head. Is 4 things I like about myself. Doing that every day, writing down 4 things. And at first, I didn't like it. But over time, it became not so bad. And I quite enjoyed doing the exercise. And had I not done that homework and I purely went to therapy sessions, my self-esteem would not be as improved as it is now. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying it's where I want it to be. There's definitely still work to be done, but it's a lot better than 5 months ago, and that's because I did the homework. Another example is when I had severe social anxiety, one of the homework tasks my therapist gave me was to speak to a classmate. That's really starting small, not being like make a best friend within 24 hours, but simply speak to a classmate, because my anxiety was bad to the point where I found it hard to say hello to people. Like even saying hi to people would give me so much dread, so much anxiety. I would overthink the whole thing. I would worry so much. My nervous system would be in fight mode the whole time, and I would feel so threatened. But one of the homework tasks was say hi to people. Say hi or talk to your classmates. Just talk or say hi. I forgot which one it was. It was done in increments. So I didn't just start out by I didn't start out by going to a group of people being like, hi, can I be your friend? Like, it was like starting slow. And something in psychology that helps with anxiety is called systematic desensitization. I remember this from studying 4 years of psych at uni. It's called systematic desensitization, which means we slowly overcome a fear we have by breaking it down into very small steps and then tackling one step at a time. And when we get comfortable with one step, we level up to the next step. So for example, with my social anxiety, might be starting the first step. I don't remember if this is exactly what was given, but this is sort of like an example. Was, for example, existing around other people, like just going and being around other people. And then the next level, once I get somewhat comfortable with that, might be to say hello to a few people or say hello to one person. And then the next step after that might be have a 2-minute conversation with someone. And then the next thing after that might be have a longer conversation with someone. And then over time, the goal is to eventually be like, make a friend. And it just like it's sort of broken down into very achievable, realistic steps that can be done. That isn't too overwhelming. It's not like going from 0 to 100. It's going from like, for example, going from 0 to 0.5, or for some people might be going from 0 to 5. It's not going from 0 to 100. I'm actually loving this, like this moving around and doing different angles video. The next thing about therapy that might be helpful to know is that you're not obligated to stick to one therapist. If you go see a therapist, right, and you don't like the therapist, you don't really vibe with the therapist, you don't feel like the therapist can give you what you need, you don't have to continue with the therapist. You're not obligated to continue with the therapist. You can, of course, continue with the therapist if you'd like to, but you don't have to. You're not serving the therapist is like serving you. The therapist is there to help you. You're not there to help the therapist. So if you don't like someone, you don't vibe with them, or over time, if you see that therapist and you realize, hey, I'm not actually getting what I need from this, the way they do therapy, their approach, the way they talk, it's just like, I'm not getting what I need out of this therapist. It's okay to swap therapists. It's okay to swap therapists. It's also okay to have 2 therapists. Yeah, you're allowed to have more than one therapist. No one's stopping you from having more than one therapist. And sometimes 2 therapists can be good to get different opinions or different perspectives on the same issue as well. But yeah, you're not obligated to stick to the therapist at all. The next thing that is important to know and might be helpful for you to know is that you have control of what you want to do in sessions. The therapist is not there. Okay, wait. You're not there to help the therapist. The therapist is there to help you. So you have control of what you want to talk about, what you want to do with the sessions, how you want to use the sessions. For example, for me, if I know what I want out of a session, say there's something really bothering me, and I know what I want out of the sessions, I'll be like, hey, this is actually what's bothering me. This is what I have so far. These are the pieces I have so far, and this is what I need you to help me with. If we don't know, that's completely okay as well. But if we say, if we don't, I don't know if I said that before. I want to say it again. If we don't vibe with a therapist as well, if we don't vibe with a therapist, we don't like a therapist, we don't like their approach, we feel like we're not getting what we need out of the sessions, then it's okay to swap therapists. It's completely okay to swap therapists. Because again, the therapist is there to help us. We're going to the therapist as a client. The therapist is not coming to us for help. So we have every right to swap therapists and being like, I'm not getting what I need from you. I'm gonna swap to a different therapist, or the approach you're working with me with is not working for me, or the way you communicate with me, or just whatever it is. We can swap therapists if we want to. We're not obligated to stick with one therapist. And even whether that be the first session or the 10th session, we don't like the therapist, we can swap therapists. We are not obligated to stick with a therapist. I'm going to climb this thing now and sit here and talk about the next point. I really love climbing. I think I mentioned that before, but I really love climbing things and just obstacle courses in general. This better not cut off my head and frame. It's always gonna be really, really sad. Okay, I don't. Okay, that's cool. All right, I don't think my head's cut off in frame. If it is what it is. I guess you can see me headless if this actually cuts off my head in frame. The next thing, I may or may not have mentioned at the start, but there's no shame in going to therapy, and there's no shame in going to therapy more than once. With me, I went to therapy after a really bad state and a bad place in my life. And then I felt so ashamed going back to therapy like 2 years later, because I told myself, you went to therapy for Folev, you should have it all figured out. Why are you going to therapy again? And I felt so ashamed to go to therapy, and that actually made me put off going to therapy until I hit rock bottom again in a way, and I'm like, no, I can't do this without therapy. And then when I went to the same therapist, she told me something along the lines of, you're in a different place in your life, you have different experiences now, you're struggling with different things you worked on in the past, may be better, but there's new things or unaddressed things that you haven't actually worked on before. And I'm like, and then that hit me. I'm like, I'm punishing myself too much for going back to therapy, because I think going to therapy too much is shameful. I believe that I was weak for going to therapy so much, but it's different places. It's different places in my life, different experiences. I'm going through different things. My headspace is different struggles, things that I haven't worked on before, or new things in life that have come up that previous therapy has not addressed because it hasn't happened before. So there's no shame in going to therapy as much as you need. And help seeking is definitely not something that is a sign of weakness. Reaching out is actually a sign of strength, and speaking up about mental health and when we're not doing okay, I think especially for men in this society, is very brave, because I think we've all been taught to keep things to ourselves and not talk about mental health, and it's something that's, I think, taboo in certain places in the world. And the narrative of talking about mental health isn't at the same level as physical health. I think it's definitely improved over the years, but it's not the same level as physical health. Like, how many times have we told someone, I'm good, when someone asks how are you going, when we're actually not doing very well and are struggling inside? I think everyone, all of us watching this, including myself, are guilty of doing that because we, in a way, has been taught to just hide our feelings and struggles. And I think that narrative is something that needs to be rewritten because it's not very healthy, and we need to continue normalizing mental health and creating safe spaces for these human experiences to be discussed openly without judgment, and also normalizing help seeking and seeing therapists multiple times if we need to as well. Now I'm trying not to fall. Now I'm going to do this. Backwards safer than forwards, climbing down. I think that's all the thoughts I had for this video. Thank you so much for watching, folks. I hope you got something out of it, found it helpful, found it encouraging, and do know that you're definitely not alone in what you're experiencing, and it's okay to speak about mental health concerns and struggles, and it's okay to ask for help. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching me climb different things and teleport to 5 different places around the vicinity of where I'm filming this video. I do plan to make a lot more mental health videos and bring back Let's Talk About Mental Health in a way, because that's why I started this channel and I sort of forgot about it. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.